I stood in the doorway of what used to be my bedroom, watching my mother strip the last of my childhood posters from the walls. My sister Emma bounced on my bed, squealing about how she'd finally have the bigger room with the bay window overlooking the garden. Don't just stand there gawking, Arya, Mom snapped, not even looking at me. Help me move these boxes to the attic. Emma needs space for her new furniture set. I was 19 years old, home from my freshman year of college for the summer, and they were erasing me, again. But this time, I wasn't the same girl who would have swallowed her tears and complied. This time, I remembered everything. I remembered dying at 24, alone in a hospital room while my family celebrated Emma's engagement at a resort in Bali. I remembered the debt collectors, the forged signatures, the betrayal that had destroyed me. I remembered Emma wearing my grandmother's sapphire necklace at her wedding, the necklace that had been promised to me, the eldest granddaughter, in grandmother's will. A will that had mysteriously disappeared. I remembered it all, and I had been given the rarest of gifts, a second chance. Actually, Mom, I said, my voice steady in a way that made her finally turn to look at me. I think I'll keep my room. Emma's face crumpled into that practiced pout that had gotten her everything she'd ever wanted. But Daddy promised. My room is so small and dark, and I'm going to be a senior. I need space for all my college application stuff. You promised her, Richard, Mom said to my father, who had appeared in the hallway with his newspaper, as if the sound of potential conflict had summoned him like a dinner bell. Dad sighed, giving me that look of weary disappointment I knew so well. Arya, don't be selfish. You're barely here anymore. Emma lives at home. Be reasonable. Reasonable. That word had ruled my first life. Be reasonable. Be understanding. Be the bigger person. Put your sister first. No, I said simply. The shock on their faces would have been comical if it hadn't been so pathetic. In my first life, I had said yes. I'd moved to the smallest guest room, barely larger than a closet. I'd made myself smaller and smaller until I'd disappeared entirely. Excuse me? Mom's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper that used to terrify me. I said no. This is my room. I'm not giving it up. Then you can find somewhere else to stay this summer, Dad said, his face reddening. I'm not paying for your apartment and letting you take up the best room in the house when you're never here. And there it was. The financial threat, the leash they'd kept me on. That's fine, I said, picking up my already packed bag. I'd known this was coming, had prepared for it. I'll stay at Aunt Melissa's. I walked past my mother's shocked face, past Emma's calculating glare, past my father's spluttering outrage. As I reached the front door, I turned back. Oh, and Mom, you might want to check grandmother's safety deposit box at First National, the one you don't think I know about. I left her frozen in the hallway, her face white as paper. The drive to Aunt Melissa's gave me time to think, to remember. In my first life, I'd been so blind, so trusting. I'd believed that family meant unconditional love. I'd believed that if I just tried hard enough, was good enough, accomplished enough, they would finally see me, finally value me. I'd been wrong. Let me tell you how wrong I'd been. Let me tell you about the family I was born into and the 24 years of systematic erasure that had led to my death. I was the eldest child of Richard and Catherine Hayes, born on a snowy December morning. For the first 3 years of my life, I was everything to them. Their miracle, their princess, their pride. The photos from that time show a chubby, smiling toddler surrounded by adoring parents. Then Emma was born. My mother had always been beautiful, the kind of beauty that demanded attention and worship. When she'd had me, she'd gained 40 pounds and took 2 years to lose the weight. She'd resented every stretch mark, every sleepless night, every moment her body wasn't her own. Emma was different. Mom barely gained 20 pounds, lost it all within 6 weeks, and Emma was the kind of baby that everyone cooed over. Blonde where I was dark-haired, blue-eyed where mine were brown, placid where I had been colicky. More importantly, Emma looked exactly like Mom. I looked like my father's side of the family, the Italian genes that gave me olive skin and curly hair that Mom called unruly and difficult. From the moment Emma could toddle, she was the star, I became the understudy, then the stagehand, then eventually just part of the audience. It started small. My ballet classes were canceled because they were too expensive, but Emma got signed up for a more prestigious studio 2 years later. My birthday parties became joint celebrations with Emma, then eventually just Emma's party, since it's easier to do one big party instead of two. By the time I was 10, I'd learned not to ask for anything. By 12, I'd learned to be grateful for the hand-me-downs from cousins while Emma got shopping trips to the mall. By 15, I'd learned that family comes first really meant Emma comes first. But the real betrayal, the one that shaped everything, was about my grandmother. Nonna Maria was my father's mother, a fierce Italian woman who had immigrated to America with nothing and built a successful restaurant business from the ground. She'd always had a special bond with me, the granddaughter who looked like her, who had inherited her hair and her eyes and her stubborn determination. When I was 16, Nonna had pulled me aside during Sunday dinner. Aria Tesoro, I want you to know something. I'm putting everything in order, yes? And when I die, which won't be for many years, Dio Volente, you will inherit my sapphire necklace. It was my mother's and her mother's before that. It goes to the eldest granddaughter. That's tradition. That's family. She'd made me promise to never sell it, to pass it on to my own eldest daughter someday. I had cried and hugged her, feeling seen and valued in a way my own parents never made me feel. Nonna died when I was 18, 2 weeks before my high school graduation. Sudden stroke, no warning, no goodbye. At the funeral, Mom had been all sympathy and soft tears. I know how special you were to her, Aria. She talked about you constantly. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. I'd been both dreading it and anticipating it, dreading the finality of Nonna's death, but anticipating finally having something that was undeniably, indisputably mine. The day before the reading, Dad sat me down with Mom and Emma. There's been an issue with Nonna's will, he'd said, not meeting my eyes. It seems there was a later version that the lawyer doesn't have. We're going to have to let the estate go through probate without a will. But Nonna told me, I'd started. I know Nonna made a lot of promises, Mom interrupted smoothly, but without a legal document, we have to divide everything equally. That's only fair, isn't it? Fair, that word again. In the end, without the will, everything had been split between Dad and his brother, Uncle Tony. The restaurant went to Uncle Tony, who actually knew how to run it. The house was sold and the money divided. And the sapphire necklace? We think Emma should have it, Mom had said, not even bothering with an explanation. It'll look so beautiful with her coloring. I'd watched my 16-year-old sister fasten it around her neck and preen in the mirror, and something inside me had cracked. Not broken, not yet, just cracked. But I didn't know then what I know now, sitting in my car outside Aunt Melissa's house, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I didn't know that my mother had found the will, read it, and burned it. I didn't know that Nonna had left me not just the necklace, but also a trust fund worth $200,000, specifically for my education and future. I didn't know that my parents had forged probate documents to get their hands on it. I didn't know that in 6 years, they would forge my signature on loan documents, taking out $80,000 in my name to pay for Emma's dream wedding and honeymoon. I didn't know that I would discover it only when debt collectors started calling, right when I was trying to close on my first apartment. I didn't know that the stress of the debt, combined with an undiagnosed heart condition that my parents had dismissed as anxiety and attention-seeking, would kill me at 24, alone and abandoned. But I knew now. I remembered all of it, every betrayal, every theft, every moment of casual cruelty. And this time I was going to make sure it played out very differently. Aunt Melissa, my mother's younger sister, had always been the black sheep of the family. She'd gotten divorced, pursued a career as an artist instead of settling into respectable suburban motherhood, and had the audacity to be happy about it. Mom barely spoke to her, which was exactly why I'd remembered her in my dying moments of my first life as the one person who had ever asked me, "Are you okay?" and waited for a real answer. "Aria!" Melissa threw open her door before I'd even gotten out of the car. She was 52 but looked 40, with silver streaking through her dark hair and paint stains on her jeans. Your text was cryptic. What happened? I told them no, I said simply. She studied me for a long moment, then pulled me into a hug that smelled like turpentine and jasmine tea. Good. It's about damn time. Come on, let's get you settled. Over coffee at her kitchen table, a beautiful handmade piece she'd salvaged and restored herself, I told her a carefully edited version of the truth. How I was tired of being treated as lesser than. How I wanted to live my own life, make my own choices, stop shrinking myself to make room for Emma's expansive ego. I didn't tell her about the rebirth, of course. I didn't tell her that I knew exactly how the next 5 years would play out if I let them. But I told her enough. Your mother, Melissa said carefully, has always had a gift for making people feel small. She did it to me our whole childhood. I'm glad you're not letting her do it to you anymore. I need to get a job, I said. I can't rely on their money if I want to be free of them. What's your major again? Business and finance. In my first life, I'd been forced into it by Dad, who'd said it was practical. I'd been miserable but good at it. This time, I'd chosen it deliberately. I knew exactly how useful those skills would be. I actually might know someone, Melissa said thoughtfully. One of my gallery clients, Bernard Chen, he's always complaining about needing reliable summer interns for his investment firm. If you're serious about this. I'm serious about everything now. Mr. Chen hired me 3 days later. The pay was better than I'd expected, and more importantly, he treated me like a competent adult instead of an inconvenient child. I worked 40 hours a week, learned everything I could, and began planning. Because I had the most valuable commodity in the world, I knew the future. I knew that the tech startup that would go public in 6 months, the one currently taking investment, would increase its value by 400%. I knew which stocks to buy and which to avoid. I knew that the housing market in our area would spike right before I turned 22 and crash a year later. I knew which Bitcoin investments to make, which cryptocurrencies were scams, which companies would tank. I knew everything, and I was going to use every bit of that knowledge. But more than the money, though the money was crucial, I knew about the documents, the forged probate papers, the falsified will, the fake signatures on loan applications that would come later. I knew where Mom kept the sapphire necklace, in her own jewelry box, not even bothering to let Emma wear it regularly. It was a trophy, a symbol of her successful theft. And I knew about the safety deposit box. The one at First National Bank, opened 3 months after Nona's death. The one that Mom didn't know I'd discovered in my first life when I'd gone through her papers after her death at 73, hoping to find some explanation, some justification for why my own mother had hated me so much. The box where she'd kept the real will. My parents called twice in the first week. Dad tried the stern approach. You're being childish, Arya. This reflects poorly on the whole family. Mom tried manipulation. We're all so worried about you. Emma is devastated that you're angry with her. She didn't do anything wrong. I didn't answer either call. I let them go to voicemail and deleted them without listening all the way through. I'd heard these scripts before. They didn't work on me anymore. Emma tried a different tactic. She showed up at Aunt Melissa's apartment after following me home from work one day. Can we talk? She asked, all big blue eyes and practiced vulnerability. At 17, she'd already perfected the art of being the victim. Sure, I said, not inviting her inside. We stood on the front steps and I waited. I don't understand why you're so mad at me, she said, right on cue. I never asked for your room. Mom and Dad offered it. If you wanted to keep it, you should have said something earlier. I said something when it mattered. I said no. But that's so selfish. I live there full time. You're barely ever home. Then I guess it doesn't matter much, does it? Since I'm barely ever home. Her face twisted just for a second into something ugly and real before she smoothed it back into hurt confusion. Why are you being like this? We used to be close. We had never been close. Not once. Not ever. But I'd tried so hard to believe we could be in my first life. I'd kept trying until there was nothing left of me to try with. Emma, I said calmly. Go home. Tell mom and dad I'm fine. Tell them I'm happy and tell them to stop calling. But I'm done. With all of you. Live your life, I'll live mine. I walked inside and closed the door. Through the window, I watched her stand there for a full minute, her face cycling through confusion, anger, and finally, calculation. She pulled out her phone and I knew she was texting mom. It didn't matter. Let them be confused. Let them wonder what had changed in me. They'd find out soon enough. 3 weeks into my job at Chen Investments, I made my first move. Mr. Chen had mentioned the tech startup, CodeStream Solutions, in a meeting. They were looking for investors for their Series B funding round. I know it seems risky, he'd said, but their product is revolutionary. If they can scale it properly, we could see significant returns. In my first life, I'd read about CodeStream in a business journal years later, after they'd become a billion-dollar company. The early investors had made fortunes. I'd like to invest my own money, I said after the meeting. Just a small amount, $3,000. Mr. Chen looked surprised. That's very savvy for someone your age. Most people your age are saving for spring break, not thinking about equity. I'm not most people. He helped me set up the investment. $3,000. Money I'd saved from my job plus the small amount I'd had in my personal account that my parents couldn't access. It hurt to spend it, but I knew that in 6 months it would become $12,000. And I had a plan for every dollar of that money. Summer ended. I went back to college, a small state school, the only thing my parents had been willing to pay for, and even that was mainly loans in my name. But I commuted from Aunt Melissa's apartment, 45 minutes each way rather than go back to living in their house. Mom called once during orientation week. I let it go to voicemail. Arya, this is getting ridiculous. You can't stay at Melissa's forever. We've turned your old room into a study for Emma, but we can set up the guest room for you. Come home. We can talk about this like adults. Turned my room into Emma's study. Of course they had. I texted back a single sentence. I'm staying where I am. Please respect my decision. The response came within seconds. You're being incredibly selfish and hurtful. Your father and I don't deserve this treatment. I blocked the number. Fall semester passed. I worked part-time at a local accounting firm, making connections, building skills, saving every penny. Mr. Chen kept me on as a remote intern, letting me analyze portfolios and research investments. I was learning not just from him, but from my memories of my first life. Every financial mistake I'd made, every opportunity I'd missed. My CodeStream investment grew. By October, it had doubled. By December, it had tripled. In January, right before the spring semester started, I sold my shares for $13,500. I immediately invested $5,000 in Bitcoin, which was trading at $8,000 per coin. In 3 years, it would hit $60,000. I put another $5,000 into a high-yield savings account, my emergency fund. The rest went toward next semester's tuition, paying down the loans so my parents wouldn't have leverage over me. I was building an escape velocity. Dollar by dollar, decision by decision, I was becoming untouchable. It was in February, 2 weeks after my 20th birthday, which my family didn't acknowledge, that I made the trip to First National Bank. I'd thought about this moment for months, planned it, rehearsed it, prepared for every possible obstacle. In my first life, I'd discovered the safety deposit box only after Mom's death, in the inventory of her estate. But I remembered the number, 2847. I also remembered something else. Nona had added me as an authorized user on the box when I was 16, right after the conversation about the sapphire necklace. Just in case something happens to me, she'd said, you should know where the important papers are. In my first life, Mom had gone to the bank after Nona's death and had me removed as an authorized user, forging my signature. But right now, today, I was still on the account. I'd verified it with a phone call, pretending to be checking on estate matters. The bank manager, Ms. Patterson, greeted me warmly. Ms. Hayes, we haven't seen you in quite some time. How can I help you? I need to access my grandmother's safety deposit box, number 2847. Of course. Do you have your key? This was the risky part. I'm afraid I've lost it. Is there a way to access the box without it? Mrs. Patterson's smile became sympathetic. Oh, that happens more often than you'd think. We can drill the lock and replace it. There's a fee, of course. $150. I had the cash ready. That's fine. 20 minutes later, I sat in a private viewing room with a metal box in front of me. My hands were shaking as I lifted the lid. Inside, in a neat manila folder, was Nona's real will. Signed, witnessed, notarized, and dated 2 months before her death. Later than any will my parents had claimed to find. I read it through 3 times, tears streaming down my face. To my beloved granddaughter, Aria Maria Hayes, I leave my sapphire necklace passed down through 4 generations of women in our family. I also leave to her the sum of $200,000 in trust to be used for her education and to establish her life. She is to receive this at age 18 or upon my death, whichever comes first. To my son Richard and my grandson Anthony Jr., I leave my restaurant business to be managed jointly. The rest of my estate is to be divided equally among my 4 grandchildren. There was more, but that was the important part. The part that my mother had read and then destroyed or thought she'd destroyed. But she'd kept the original. Why? Insurance? Evidence? A trophy of her successful theft? It didn't matter. I had it now. I also found something else in the box. A letter addressed to me in Nona's handwriting. Cara Aria, if you're reading this, then I am gone. And I hope it is because I have lived a long and happy life with many more Sunday dinners with you. I want you to know that I see you. I see how your mother treats you, how she favors your sister. I see how your father lets it happen. And I want you to know that it is not because there is anything wrong with you. You are perfect, Tesoro. You are strong and smart and worthy of love. I am leaving you the necklace and the money because I want you to build a life away from them if you need to. I want you to be free. That is my last gift to you. Freedom. Never forget, you are a woman of the DeLuca line. We do not break. We bend the world to our will with all my love, Nona. I sat in that room and cried like I hadn't allowed myself to cry in either lifetime. For the grandmother who had loved me, for the girl I'd been, who'd been stolen from and gaslit and destroyed, for the second chance I'd been given. Then I dried my tears, made copies of everything, put the originals in a new safety deposit box in my own name at a different bank, and walked out into the winter sunshine with a plan crystallizing in my mind. It was time to stop running. It was time to reclaim what was mine. I called my Uncle Tony that night. In my first life, we'd barely spoken after Nona's death, but I'd learned later that he'd been suspicious of the probate process. He'd believed the will existed, he'd just never been able to prove it. Uncle Tony, it's Aria. Aria, sweetheart, I haven't heard from you in ages. How are you? I'm well. I wanted to ask you something about Nona's estate. There was a pause. I'm listening. Did you ever think there was another will, a later one? Another pause, longer this time. Why are you asking? Because I found it. I met him at a coffee shop the next day. He was 57, with Dad's eyes but a warmer smile, and when I showed him the copies, his hands shook. I knew it, he whispered. I knew Catherine was lying. She kept pushing for the quick probate, saying we needed to move on and not drag things out. But your Nona was so careful about this stuff. She wouldn't have died without a will. She didn't. Mom found it and hid it. I have proof. We need to talk to a lawyer. I know, but I want to understand something first. What happens when we bring this forward? To her? To Dad? Uncle Tony's face hardened. If we can prove she deliberately hid the will, that's fraud, serious fraud. She could face criminal charges, your father too, if he knew about it. And the money? The trust fund that should have gone to me? You'd get it, with interest. Plus damages, possibly. Aria, this is a lot of money we're talking about. And your relationship with your parents is already over, I said firmly. They chose to steal from me. They chose to lie. Whatever happens now, they brought on themselves. He studied me for a long moment. You've changed. You're not the quiet little girl who used to sit in the corner at family dinners. No, I agreed. I'm not. We hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Valdez, who specialized in estate fraud. She was expensive, but Uncle Tony offered to cover the costs up front, to be repaid from the settlement. This is going to get ugly, she warned us at our first meeting. Family cases always do. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my first life, about dying alone because my family cared more about a resort vacation than visiting me in the hospital, about the debt collectors who'd called my hospital room because Emma needed a designer wedding dress, about 24 years of being erased. I'm prepared, I said. The lawsuit was filed in March. The legal papers were delivered to my parents' house on a Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't there, obviously, but I could imagine it. Dad opening the envelope, Mom reading the complaint, her face going white, Emma asking what was wrong, being told it was grown-up stuff. Dad called me 37 times that night. Mom called 52. Emma sent a long rambling text about how I was destroying the family and breaking Mom's heart. I didn't answer any of them. What I did do was this. I called a locksmith, gave him Aunt Melissa's address, and had every lock in her apartment changed. Then I filed a restraining order, a temporary one, pending the outcome of the lawsuit, citing harassment and concern for my safety given the large sum of money involved. The order was granted. 2 days later, Dad showed up at the apartment anyway. I called the police. He was arrested for violating the restraining order. Mom tried a different approach. She called Aunt Melissa, crying, begging her to talk sense into that girl. Aunt Melissa told her, "Maybe you should have thought about this before you stole from your own daughter," and hung up. The case moved forward. Discovery was a beautiful thing. The subpoenas, the bank records, the notary logs showing when Mom had opened the safety deposit box just weeks after Nana's death. The testimony from Mrs. Patterson about how Catherine Hayes had come in asking about securing important family documents. And then the forensic accountant's report showing exactly where Nana's $200,000 had gone. Home renovations, Emma's private school tuition, a new car for Mom, vacations, designer clothes. The money that was supposed to secure my future had been spent on making their lives more comfortable. In May, Dad's lawyer approached us about a settlement. They'd pay back the $200,000 with interest, coming to about $297,000 if I agreed to drop the criminal fraud charges against Mom. I said no. Why? Patricia asked me, genuinely curious. It's a good settlement. You'd get your money and you'd avoid a trial. Trials are expensive and stressful. Because money isn't the only thing they stole from me, I said. They stole my grandmother's love. They stole my peace. They stole years of my life. I want them to face consequences for that. She smiled. All right then, let's go to trial. The trial was set for September. I spent the summer working full-time again at Chen Investments, saving money, building my portfolio, and most importantly, staying far away from my family. My Bitcoin investment had grown to $18,000. I sold half, keeping the other half for the future spike I knew was coming. The money I pulled out went into index funds and a diversified portfolio that would grow steadily over the next few years. I also started looking at houses. Not to buy yet, I couldn't afford that, but to learn the market. Because I knew that when I was 22, there would be a perfect window to buy right before the market spiked. I'd be ready. Emma graduated high school that June. I knew because I saw the photos on social media, her in a white dress, smiling between Mom and Dad, holding a bouquet of roses. They'd rented out a restaurant for her party. Expensive, excessive. I wondered how they were paying for it, with the lawsuit hanging over them. Then I remembered they'd always been good at looking rich while being in debt. It was part of their image. I didn't attend. I wasn't invited, of course. But I wouldn't have gone anyway. In August, I got a message from an account I didn't recognize. It was Emma, clearly using a friend's phone since I'd blocked her. This is so stupid. We're family. Families fight sometimes, but they get over it. You're ruining Mom and Dad's lives over money. Don't you care about us at all? I stared at the message for a long time. In my first life, this would have worked. The guilt, the obligation, the idea that I was the one being unreasonable. But I'd had 5 years in my next life to learn what they were capable of. 5 years of being bled dry, gaslit, and finally killed by their carelessness. I typed back, "You got my room, my grandmother's necklace, my college fund, and my parents' love. Now you get to see what consequences feel like. Don't contact me again." I blocked that number too. The trial lasted 3 days. It should have been longer, but the evidence was overwhelming. The original will, the bank records, the testimony from the notary who'd witnessed Nona's signature, the forensic accountant's report. Dad tried to claim he hadn't known about the will. The evidence suggested otherwise. There were emails between him and Mom discussing the Aria situation and needing to handle things carefully. Mom's lawyer tried to argue that she'd been acting in the family's best interest, that she'd intended to share the money with me eventually, that this was all a misunderstanding. The jury didn't buy it. The verdict came back on a Friday afternoon. Guilty of estate fraud. Guilty of theft by deception. Guilty of forgery. The judge ordered my parents to repay the full $267,000 to me. Additionally, Mom was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. Dad got 18 months suspended, plus 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service. Emma wasn't in the courtroom. She'd been carefully kept out of the legal proceedings. She was still a minor during most of the theft, and there was no evidence she'd known what was happening. But she knew now. As the bailiffs led my mother away, she looked at me, really looked at me, for maybe the first time in my life. "I'm your mother," she said, her voice breaking. "How could you do this to me?" I met her eyes and felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness. Just the cold clarity of justice. "You did this to yourself," I said. The money was placed in an escrow account pending the outcome of appeals. It would take another few months, but it was as good as mine. In the meantime, I had another move to make. I called Aunt Melissa. "Do you think Emma knows where Mom keeps Nona's necklace?" "Probably in her jewelry box. Why?" "Because it's mine. The will specified it. And I want it back." "Aria, the house is going to be locked up tight. Your dad will be in court-ordered therapy 3 times a week and working community service every weekend." I checked his schedule. There was a pause. "You've really thought this through." "I've had a lot of time to think." It was actually simpler than I expected. Dad had changed the locks after the trial, but I'd planned for that. I hired a lawyer to file an emergency motion for the immediate return of specific property mentioned in the will, namely the sapphire necklace. The judge granted it. The police escorted me to the house to retrieve it. Dad wasn't there, community service day. Emma answered the door, her face puffy from crying. "You got Mom sent to prison," she said, her voice full of venom. "She's in prison because of you." "She's in prison because she committed fraud," I corrected calmly. "Where's the necklace?" "I don't know what you're—" The police officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, we have a court order. You can show us where it is, or we can search for it. Your choice." Emma led us to Mom's bedroom, moving like she was walking to her execution. The jewelry box sat on the dresser, an ornate wooden thing that had probably cost more than my first car. There, nestled in velvet, was Nona's sapphire necklace. The stones caught the light, deep blue and luminous. 4 generations of women had worn this necklace. It had been promised to me. And now it was mine. I fastened it around my neck, feeling the weight of it, the history, the love. In the mirror, I could see Emma's face behind me, twisted with anger and loss. "That's mine," she whispered. "She gave it to me." "Mom had no right to give it to you. It was never hers to give. Read the will." "This is all about jewelry and money to you, isn't it? You don't even care that you destroyed our family." I turned to face her. "Emma, our family was destroyed the day Mom decided to steal from me. The day Dad backed her up. The day both of them decided you were worth more than me. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped letting you build your happiness on my suffering." "You're a horrible person," she spat. "Maybe," I said. "But I'm a horrible person wearing my grandmother's necklace, with my inheritance in the bank and my freedom intact. What are you? I walked out of that house, out of that family, out of that life. I didn't look back. The appeals were denied in December. The money was released to me in January, just after my 21st birthday, $267,000, plus the $45,000 I'd made from investments, plus my salary and savings. I had $325,000. I was 21 years old, completely estranged from my family, and richer than I'd been in my entire first life. And I was just getting started. I graduated college that spring with a degree in finance, summa cum laude. Mr. Chen offered me a full-time position at his firm. I accepted. I bought my first house that summer, a small 3-bedroom in an up-and-coming neighborhood, taking advantage of the market dip I'd known was coming. I paid cash, no mortgage, and immediately rented out 2 rooms to graduate students. The rental income covered my expenses while I funneled every dollar of my salary into investments. By the time I was 23, my portfolio was worth $580,000. By 24, the age I died in my first life, I was worth over $800,000. I lived simply, modestly. I didn't need designer clothes or fancy cars or validation from social media. I needed security, freedom, power, and I was building it brick by brick, dollar by dollar. I'd heard through Aunt Melissa that Mom had been released from prison after 15 months. She and Dad had sold the house, the big, beautiful house in the suburbs, and moved into a small apartment. Dad's law practice had suffered during the scandal. Clients didn't want to work with a man who'd helped his wife defraud his own daughter. Emma had started at a state school, the same one I'd attended, on a partial scholarship. She was living at home, commuting, working part-time, living the life I'd lived in my first timeline. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, but no guilt either. They'd made their choices. These were the consequences. I made different choices, better ones. I dated occasionally, carefully, learning from my first life's mistakes. I'd married young the first time, to a man who'd seemed stable but was really just controlling. He'd left me when the debt from Emma's wedding had destroyed my credit. I'd died divorced and alone. This time, I was in no hurry. This time, I knew that I didn't need someone to complete me. I was already whole. I traveled, Paris, Tokyo, Rome, all the places I dreamed of seeing but never could afford. I stood in the Louvre, wearing Nana's necklace, and felt her presence, her pride, her love. "We bend the world to our will," she'd written. And I had. It was on my 25th birthday, 1 year past my death date in the first timeline, that I got the call. "Is this Aria Hayes?" An official voice, crisp and professional. "Yes?" "This is Margaret Chen from First National Bank. I'm calling about safety deposit box 2847, originally belonging to Maria DeLuca Hayes." My heart stopped. "What about it?" "We're doing an audit of long-term boxes, and we've discovered that there's an additional box registered under the same account, box 2848. It's been flagged as requiring the presence of the primary heir, you, before it can be opened." What? "It appears Mrs. Hayes set up a secondary box with instructions that it only be opened by you, after you turn 25, or in the event of," she paused, "certain specific circumstances. Can you come in?" I was at the bank within an hour. Box 2848 was smaller than the first. Inside was a single envelope with my name on it and a key. The letter read, "Cara Aria. If you are reading this, then you have found the will, claimed your inheritance, and reached your 25th birthday. I am so proud of you. There is one more gift I have for you. The key in this envelope opens a storage unit in Lakeside Storage, Unit 47B. The rental has been paid for 50 years. Inside, you will find certain items that belonged to me, items I didn't trust to remain in the family home after my death. You will understand when you see them. All my love. Always, Nona." The storage unit was on the other side of town. I drove there in a daze, key clutched in my hand. Unit 47B was climate-controlled, medium-sized. I unlocked it and pulled up the rolling door. Inside were boxes. Dozens of them, neatly labeled. Restaurant records, 1985 and 1995, property deeds, investment accounts, photo albums, jewelry collection, and one box, smaller than the rest, simply labeled, "For Aria." I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was another letter, and beneath it, documentation. Stocks, bonds, Account information. Tesoro, I knew that if your mother found my will, she might try to steal from you. So I made sure she couldn't find everything. This is your real inheritance. Not the money I left in the official will. That was the decoy, the test to see if your parents would do the right thing. These stocks and bonds are worth approximately $400,000 today. By the time you are 25, they should be worth much more. I also own 3 properties that are not in my will: a small apartment building in the city, a commercial property near the restaurant, and a parcel of land upstate. They are now yours. The deeds are in this box. I have also included my mother's jewelry collection, not just the sapphire necklace, but all of it. Rings, bracelets, earrings. Some pieces are worth quite a lot. They belong to you. This is your safety net, your insurance, your legacy. Use it wisely. Use it to build the life you deserve. I love you more than words can say. Nona, I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit and laughed until I cried. Then I cried until I laughed. Then I just sat there, surrounded by my grandmother's love, and felt the last piece of my broken heart click into place. Nona had known. She'd known what her son and daughter-in-law were capable of, and she'd protected me anyway from beyond the grave. The stocks were now worth $1.2 million. The properties generated about $8,000 a month in rental income. The jewelry was appraised at $350,000. At 25, I was worth $2.7 million. I'd never have to worry about money again. I'd never have to depend on anyone. I'd never have to shrink myself or settle or accept less than I deserved. I was free. I called Aunt Melissa that night. I need to tell you something. Good news or bad news? Complicated news. Nona left me more than we thought, a lot more. I told her everything about the storage unit, the properties, the safety net Nona had built. That sneaky, brilliant woman, Melissa said, her voice thick with emotion. She never told me. She made sure you'd be okay. She knew they'd try to take everything. So she hid it where Mom would never find it. What are you going to do? Live, I said simply. I'm going to live the life she wanted me to have. I did tell Uncle Tony. He deserved to know. He cried when I showed him the letter. She talked about you constantly, Basasa, he said. Near the end, she kept saying, I have to make sure Arya is protected. Promise me you'll watch out for her. You did, I said. You helped me fight for the will. I didn't do nearly enough. I should have pushed harder, sooner. I should have known what Catherine and Richard were capable of. It wasn't your job to protect me from my own parents. That should have been their job. I quit my job at Chen Investments. It had served its purpose, taught me, connected me, launched my career. But I didn't need to work for someone else anymore. Instead, I started my own financial consulting firm, specializing in estate planning and generational wealth. I helped other people protect their assets from family members who might try to steal. I became the advocate I'd needed. The business grew quickly. Turns out there were a lot of people with stories like mine, families who'd been betrayed, inheritances that had been stolen, trust that had been shattered. I helped them fight back. By the time I was 28, my firm had 15 employees and offices in 3 cities. I was featured in Forbes 30 Under 30. I gave talks at universities about financial literacy and family dynamics. I'd written a book about estate planning that became a surprise bestseller, and through it all, I wore Nona's sapphire necklace every day. A reminder of where I'd come from, what I'd survived, and who I'd become. I heard about my family occasionally through the grapevine. Dad had retired early, his reputation never recovering. Mom had gotten a job at a department store, a far cry from her previous life of leisure and shopping. They'd stayed together, bound by shared bitterness. Emma had graduated, gotten a job in marketing, married young. She'd unfriended me on all social media years ago, but mutual acquaintances still shared news sometimes. She was fine. Not happy, not thriving, but fine. I didn't hate them. I didn't love them either. I simply felt nothing. They were strangers who happened to share my DNA. It was at a charity gala in the city, a fundraiser for college scholarships for first-generation students, that I ran into her. Emma, 31 years old now, her blonde hair shorter, her face harder. She was there with her husband, some finance guy, both of them overdressed and trying too hard. She saw me across the room. I watched the recognition dawn, followed by calculation, then resignation. She came over, her husband didn't. Arya. Emma. You look good, successful. Thank you. An awkward pause. Around us, people laughed and clinked champagne glasses and talked about their vacation homes. I read about your company, she said finally. About what you do. Helping people with estate stuff. Yes. It's good, important work. I waited. There was something she wanted to say. I could see it in the way she kept glancing at me and then away. I wanted to say, she started, then stopped. Started again. I was 17. When all that happened. When you found the will. I didn't understand what Mom had done, not really. I thought you were just being dramatic, that you were making a big deal out of nothing. I said nothing. But I've been thinking about it more. Now that I'm older, and I think I get it now. What they took from you. What they stole. It wasn't just money. No, I agreed. It wasn't just money. I'm sorry, she said. I know it doesn't mean much now. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm sorry. I looked at her, really looked at her. Saw the lines around her eyes, the expensive handbag that was probably bought on credit, the desperation to seem successful. Saw the woman who'd gotten everything I was supposed to have and was still unhappy. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. I do, but Emma, I need you to understand something. You were 17, yes, but you're 31 now. You've had 14 years to reach out, to apologize, to acknowledge what happened. You're doing it now at a public event when you saw that I've become successful. That timing says something. Her face flushed. I'm not angry anymore, I continued. I don't hate you, but I also don't need you in my life. I hope you're happy. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but we're not going to be sisters. We're not going to rebuild a relationship. We're just two people who used to know each other. That's really how you want to leave it. That's how they left it, I corrected gently. When they chose to steal from me, when you chose to benefit from that theft without questioning it, I'm just accepting reality. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Then she nodded, once, and walked away. I turned back to the party, to my life, to my future. I didn't watch her go. 2 weeks later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "The bedroom." I almost deleted it. Then I opened it. Arya, this is Dad. Emma gave me your email address. I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I don't have the right to contact you, but I needed you to know something. Your mother and I are getting divorced. It's been a long time coming. The truth is, we've been barely holding it together since the trial, since we lost the house, since everything fell apart. I've been in therapy, a lot of therapy, and I've come to understand some things about how we treated you, about how I failed you as a father. I let your mother poison our family. I let her convince me that loving you less than Emma was somehow justified. I let her steal from you. I helped her hide it. And when you fought back, I chose her side instead of doing what was right. I can't change any of that. I can't give you back your childhood or the years we lost, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what we did to you, and I'm sorry. We're selling the condo. Emma told me you have a firm that helps with estate planning. I was hoping you might have a colleague who could help me. Not you. I wouldn't ask you to work with me. But someone at your firm. I want to do this right, this time. I want to make sure Emma gets what's fair, but I also want to set up a trust for any future grandchildren. I don't want to repeat our mistakes. Also, about your bedroom. The one Emma took. We cleaned it out when we sold the house. There wasn't much left. You'd taken most of your things years before, but I found a box of your childhood drawings and some photo albums that had gotten shoved in the back of the closet. I've been holding on to them. If you want them, I can send them to you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to respond. But I needed you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were the best of us, and we destroyed you for it. I'm sorry. Dad? I read the email 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and went to make tea. Part of me wanted to respond. The part that was still, somewhere deep inside, the little girl who'd wanted her father's love. The part that remembered him pushing me on the swings before Emma was born, calling me his princess, promising me the world. But that little girl was gone. She'd died in a hospital room at 24, alone and betrayed. She'd been reborn into a woman who knew better than to trust pretty words from people who'd proven their character through their actions. I didn't respond to the email, but I did forward it to one of my associates, along with a note. Potential new client. Standard estate planning, nothing complicated. He's my father. I'm conflicted out, obviously, but he's genuine about wanting to do the right thing. Charge him your normal rates. I didn't send him the photo albums. I didn't need them. I had my own memories now, better ones I'd built for myself. My 30th birthday came and went. I celebrated with Aunt Melissa, Uncle Tony, and a close group of friends I'd built carefully over the years. People who valued me, people who saw me. We had dinner at Nana's old restaurant. Uncle Tony had expanded it, made it into a small chain, and the original location was now a upscale fine dining establishment. He'd dedicated the space to her memory with her photo by the door as well. To Aria, Aunt Melissa raised her glass. To the life you've built and the woman you've become. To second chances, I added quietly. To second chances, they echoed. That night, alone in my house, not the starter home I'd bought at 21, but the beautiful Victorian I'd purchased at 27, with a garden and a library and a sense of permanence, I took out Nona's letter and read it one more time. You are a woman of the DeLuca line. We do not break. We bend the world to our will. I'd bent the world to my will. I'd taken betrayal and turned it into triumph. I'd taken theft and turned it into justice. I'd taken a second chance at life and built something extraordinary. The bedroom they'd given my sister, the room they'd thought was so important, the ultimate symbol of their preference and my disposability, was empty now. They'd sold the house. The room belonged to some other family. The entire thing was irrelevant. Because the joke was this. I'd never needed that room. I'd never needed their house or their approval or their love. I'd needed exactly what Nona had given me. The tools to build my own life, my own empire, my own happiness. They'd given my sister my bedroom, thinking they were taking something from me. But after Rebirth, after I'd reclaimed my inheritance and built my fortune and created my freedom, I'd left behind something far more devastating than an empty room. I'd left them with nothing, no money, no pride, no illusions, just the bitter truth of what they'd done and what they'd lost, and I'd walked away with everything. My grandmother's love, my own power, and a life beyond their wildest dreams. In the end, the bedroom didn't matter at all because I'd never been fighting for a room. I'd been fighting for myself, and I'd won.